Okay, so let's talk about solving equations that involve fractions. So if I were to give you 6 minus 2/3 x equals -8. Let's keep in mind that solving is all about opposites. So if I were to look at this, I have where the fraction is the big deal. So I would see that this says 2 divided by 3. The opposite of dividing by 3 is, of course, multiplying by 3. So what I would do is I would take every piece of this equation and I would multiply by 3. Technically 3 over 1 when we're dealing with fractions. And the reason I would do that is because that's the opposite of division, which should help me get rid of the fractions if I do this correctly. So let's see what happens. 3 times 6 is 18. If I use my calculator and do 3 over 1 times 2 over 3, that will give me 2. So I have minus 2x equals, just do the multiplication here, -8 times 3 is -24. And then take a look at what we've got. No more fractions. Now this is an easy equation, should be an easy equation to solve. So I would just subtract 18 from both sides. Those go to 0, leave me with -2x. I'll be very careful with this. I have a -24 and a -18, so I'm actually going to add them together, which would give me -42. Lastly, divide by -2 and get that x is +21. Okay. Once again, the big deal here was that this says 2 divided by 3. The opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. Okay? So, let's try another one. If I were to give you -5/4 x minus 3 equals -33. Take a look at that equation, decide what it is it tells you to do, and use that to make the decision as how you would begin solving it. What would you do in this problem? I see that this says -5 divided by 4. So I am going to take everything in the equation and do the opposite. I'm going to multiply this by 4 over 1, multiply this by 4, and multiply this by 4. Again, if I do this correctly, I should get rid of the fractions. Use your calculator. What's 4 over 1 times -5/4? That should give you -5x, and hopefully you actually did that in your calculator. -3 times 4 is -12, and then -33 times 4, let's see, I have -33 times 4 is -132. But again, keep in mind the purpose, no more fractions. Now that shouldn't be very difficult to solve. Okay? Why don't you pause the video, go ahead and solve it yourself. If I add 12 to both sides, I get -5x equals -120. Divide by -5. X equals -120 divided by 5 is +24. Once there's no fractions, it becomes a lot simpler. Now, don't get me wrong. Could you add 3 to both sides? Yes, you could. Could you then divide by -5/4 on both sides? Yes, you could. But honestly, the average attempt at doing that, people will not get it correct. Okay? Let's try one more that looks slightly different. If I had 9 over 2 minus 6k over 5 equals -27 over 10. Okay? Once again, I look at this, I decide why it looks so nasty, and that decision for me is because there are not only 3 different fractions, but those fractions all have different denominators. So what I'm going to do is think about what I know about fractions. Usually when I have to do stuff with fractions, I need common denominators. Okay, what would the common denominator here be? You're right, it would be 10. So an important thing here, I don't actually want to get common denominators because that means I still have fractions. If you think about what I've been doing, I don't want the fractions anymore. So what I'm going to do is just make a note that my least common denominator is in fact 10. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to get common denominators, I'm going to use the common denominator the way that I did up above. I'm going to multiply everything in here by 10 over 1. And again, if I choose the correct number, if I do this correctly, I should make the fractions go away so it becomes a much easier equation to solve. Okay, so let's do it. Again, in your calculator, what is 10 over 1 times 9 over 2? It should be 45. Okay, make sure you're using your calculator and actually doing this instead of waiting for me to do it. 60 divided by 5. And this should be 12k equals negative 27. All right, again, no more fraction. So now we can solve just like normal. Draw the wall if you need to. Subtract 45 from both sides. Those go away, leaves me with negative 12k equals, use your calculator, it's negative 27 minus 45. Gave me negative 72, hopefully it did you as well. Divide by negative 12. Again, please use your calculator. Negative 72 divided by negative 12 is positive 6. Okay, 3 more examples of what's going on here. Notice that what we are doing is using the common denominator, multiplying every piece of the equation by that denominator. This is the strategy I would like you to use. It's what I expect to see on your papers, and it's how I expect to see the homework done. If you have any questions, I will actually be here after school, and I'll be here early in the morning on Wednesday. Feel free to come on in. Thank you.